Hello, I'm Dale Leftwich with RealAgriculture. Today I'm with Steve Shirtliffe. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing well. It's great. You know, I grew up in southern Manitoba, and it's great to be back here. And you know, there's even a handful of relatives of mine out in the audience today, which is something.
I saw that. Yeah, your cousins showed up.
Some cousins. Yeah.
Yeah. They cheered you, which is not usually what my cousins do. They usually make fun of me. So you got good cousins here in Manitoba. So your talk today, you're a university professor from the University of Saskatchewan, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you came here to talk about weed resistance.
Yeah.
And the idea of your talk was to create systems to beat this. I think is a way of describing it.
That's a fair summation of it, and I think. Typically what kind of characterizes is we look at elements of weed control, in most cases not herbicidal, like not using herbicides, but using different cultural or mechanical ways to control weeds that perhaps in combination with herbicides would work better. So, our approach has been to not just recommend a practice because we think it's a good idea, but to actually go out and test it. So to, you know, like how well does it work? What works and what doesn't work has been a general theme, you know, and so that's kind of what we're looking for. The first thing, go ahead.
And I was just wondering what kinds of things that you're isolating then in terms of like really doing the testing and not kind of going just with, well, this is the theory or this is what my grandpa did.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, the one thing that we found out is when you do have difficulty controlling a weed at an early stage for whatever reason, whether it be herbicide resistance or whether it be if you're growing oats and you have wild oats as a weed and then there's no spray for controlling wild oats and oats, so essentially they're herbicide resistance when they grow in there, and there's examples in other crops where there's weeds that are difficult if not impossible to control, and there is increasing the crop seeding rate is a very good way of helping the crop compete with that weed and essentially suppressing the weed. If you think of it, you know, when you're growing crops, what you're trying to do is build a solar panel, and the quicker that you can have that crop form a canopy that blocks off the light, and then therefore they can use that energy to build yield in the crop, the quicker you can do that and the more it can shade it out. It actually has a weed control benefit as well, in that it can shade the weeds out. And weeds, once they're shaded out, often is quite interesting. You can often even kill them just through competition if the crop is ahead of the weed. If the weed's ahead of the crop, well, that's another matter.
Well, yeah, that's a huge problem with many crops is if the weeds get ahead, well, like the early competition is deadly, and not just for the competition. There seems to be other things going on in there, and if the crop gets ahead, it's really quite a bit better.
Yeah, it's quite a bit better. Yeah, so that was one of the things we looked at. I also talked about harvest weed seed management. You know, I did work years ago when I was a PhD student back here at the University of Manitoba with Martin Enns on chaff collection. And you know, now there's been, I'm sure you guys have done profiles on harvest weed seed management.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's you know one of those factors. And the one thing that I identified, and one thing that I think we need to think more about, and that we did look at from a modeling perspective, is that harvest weed seed management isn't just about taking weeds off the field. It's also about preventing dispersal of those weeds, because when a combine if there's weed seeds on the plant and it goes through there, of course the material that's taken into the combine doesn't leave the combine immediately. The combine's moving, and these days, you know, with very powerful combines, they're often moving. They can be moving quite quickly, and by the time those weed seeds, and we know that a lot of them will come out in the chaff, get ejected from the combine's moved down the field. So if you're going out there and there's a lot of weed seeds in your field, and let's say if they're herbicide resistant, you can actually be spreading those through your field. And one thing that we identified was that a better strategy in many cases, in the case of wild oat, is waiting until those seeds fall off. It's kind of a counterintuitive thing, because you think, oh no, I want to get them and take them off the field. Maybe some of them will be my grain, it'll just be dockage, but you're actually better off letting them fall on the ground, and then they don't move, right? And they're close. There's already wild oats there already. There's already a patch there. You know, it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like this idea that, okay, this part is bad, how much worse can it get? You're better off just leaving it there rather than spreading it all over the place. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, I talked about some of the older literature, why group one, why herbicide resistant in wild oats has not become more of a problem. Of course, one of the other reasons is having glyphosate resistant crops and glufosinate resistant crops. But I think that's one of the reasons why it hasn't spread within the fields as much as we expected it to. Because we've had group one herbicide resistant wild oats since you know, the 90s, you know.
But you're saying that it is a problem.
It is a problem.
But it would be a worse problem if the seed didn't fall out before the combine hits it.
That's my
idea.
And we addressed that, you know, years ago by computer modeling on a 486, you know, using BASIC as a programming language, you know, But
so what about things like simple things like disruption? You know, like any weed kind of develops quite effectively when the system that's growing is always the same. So, for instance, you don't think of it, but in many ways, quackgrass was resistant to a cultivator because that system of trying to control quackgrass was not effective at all. You'd just spread it around the field.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of one of the tenets. The tenets of integrated weed management is to do different things. The one thing, and again, is within that is, you know, you want to focus on what's effective, you know, and you know, some of the things that, and so in terms of you know, one of the things that I talked about was mechanical weed control, and not widely practiced not even widely practiced, not practiced essentially hardly at all anymore in conventional agriculture. You know, people have gone away from their cultivators. They've got conventional farmers. The row crops have gone, to, you know, herbicide tolerant systems.
You don't need 36 inches to get your ox through in between the corn to plow it anymore,
the horse hoeing husbandry is gone.
Yeah.
But, you know, there is newer technology, you know, for automatically steering inter-row cultivators, as well as some older machines like tine harrows, light tine harrows, and rotary hoes that when we looked at it. To be honest, they could deliver, when it's done very well, when you get it exactly the right timing, you can get surprisingly good levels of weed control. You know, we're getting levels of weed control in lentils, a very uncompetitive crop. Without herbicides, levels of weed control, you know, in the 70% weed control, you know, without using herbicides, by having rotary hoeing at a proper timing and then inter-row cultivation to follow up on that. And then combining that with an increased seeding rate to give us some more competition, we could get quite good levels of weed control. Are conventional farmers going to adopt that and stop using herbicides? Probably not. The issue maybe, though, is that we are getting pushed into a corner. You know, we're getting less and less herbicides, especially in some of our smaller acre crops. They're not, you know, they will probably never have a herbicide tolerant system developed for them because of the regulatory costs. We're going to probably have to be forced or get desperate enough to use some of these methods. And so, you know, that's some of the things we looked at. In terms of disrupting the life cycle, another thing we've looked at is this idea of the idea of harvest weed seed management, and that in harvest weed seed management, the idea is that you're trying to get the weed seeds from going into the seed bank back on the field, right?
Yeah.
Well, and there's also another timing you can look at. If you haven't been able to control the weeds during the seedling stage through usually herbicide control, or in the case of if you didn't have herbicide control through mechanical control, if those weeds grow up and you have a short crop, there's an opportunity to exploit that height difference to either clip the weeds above the crop canopy, or to try to wipe herbicides on them with a wick type applicator.
Right.
And what we found is that the clipping can be surprisingly effective in short crops as far as seed.
And that's return. Because the crop does not have enough time to reproduce a seeding, like a seed-bearing part of the plant.
Yeah, exactly. You wait till it gets, growing up a fair bit and cut it off.
Yeah.
And then normally what we found is that you often need a second time to go up there, because if you wait too long, the seeds that you cut off are going to be viable.
Right. Yeah.
But so if you get it, let them grow up, but not, and then go back a second time to get that second thing, you can almost eliminate seed production, and that won't make. We haven't been able to measure a difference as far as any difference that makes in the crop that year, because there's already a lot of leaf matter down in the canopy competing with the crop. But it does it can make a pretty big difference as to how many seeds grow the year following, because you're preventing that seed rain into the crop. Yeah.
Have you got a lot of more research planned on this whole idea of resistance, because it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem?
So we have. So myself, I don't know if you've probably interviewed Eric Johnson over the years.
Yes,
So Eric he's not with Ag Canada anymore. He's working with the university, and he's working with us at the university, and he's heading up a project looking at actually herbicide-resistant wild oat control, mostly in cereals for now. We want to expand it out. We see a real need for looking at this, and we're looking at this from using some we're trying to combine, what we're doing is combining mechanical methods as well as conventional herbicides, but new herbicide modes of actions. They're not new, but new ones that would be used on the prairies. We're even going to be looking at some precision herbicide application techniques like inter-row spraying. Mm-hmm. So instead of like inter-row cultivation, what we did, there's been some early studies that shows that you can, especially with modern, the machines aren't quite ready for prime time, but we want to show that on a research level that you may be able to spray in between the rows of a crop and get those weeds there with a herbicide, and try to evaluate if that will work. We don't know if it will or won't. That's why we're doing the research, right?
Yeah.
Tom Wolf's also part of that. Tom from the nozzle stuff to to look at the drift aspects of this very fine scale type of stuff, and as well as looking at things like competition and mechanical weed control and blanket applications, and using some, maybe incorporating some older herbicide or groups, and this idea of putting together a package, kind of a system that is rock solid against Group 1 resistance and Group 2 resistance in wild oats.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
so that's where we're going.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
I will. Yeah. Okay, we will for sure. We'll come back to you. I just really want to thank Steve Shirtliffe for being with us today at CropConnect. Thanks for letting us know where we are and some of these alternative methods to control weed resistance. Okay. Well, let's hope they all. I'm not trying to wish harm on the world, but I'm hoping that it's my sincere hope that some of these methods are taken up by the mainstream, because I think we've certainly seen a real difference on the plot level. Yeah. Yes, okay, great. Thanks a lot. Okay, thank you.